The smoke rose thin and grey against the autumn sky, curling up from somewhere beyond the ridge. Ethan Cross reined in his horse and stared at it, his chest tightening for reasons he couldn't name. No one lived out here. Not anymore. He'd been riding the boundary of what used to be his land, 40 acres of scrub and stone that the bank had taken 6 months ago. He told himself he was just passing through, heading toward work in the northern mines. But the truth was darker and heavier. He was looking for ghosts. It had been 2 years since Sarah vanished. 2 years since he'd come home from a 3-day cattle drive to find the cabin door open, her shawl draped over the chair, and the stew still warm on the stove. No note, no sign of struggle, just gone, like she'd walked into the wind and never looked back. The sheriff had searched. Neighbors had whispered. Some said Comanche took her. Others said she'd run off with a drifter. Ethan had ridden himself half to death searching every town, every camp, every rumor. He'd found nothing. Eventually the searching stopped. The money ran out. The land went to auction, and Ethan became the kind of man who drifted, hollow-eyed and silent, working odd jobs and sleeping rough, carrying her memory like a stone in his chest. He should have kept riding, should have ignored the smoke, but something pulled at him, a sick, nagging curiosity, or maybe just loneliness sharp enough to cut. He nudged the horse forward, down the ridge and into the valley where the smoke thickened. The cabin appeared through the trees like a faded memory, small, weathered, with a stone chimney and a rail fence patched with fresh wood. Clothes hung on a line. A garden plot showed late squash and dying tomato vines, peaceful, lived in. And standing beside the door, stirring a pot over an open fire, was a woman in a faded blue dress. Ethan's heart stopped. He knew that dress. He'd bought it for her in town 3 summers ago. The woman turned, and the world tilted. It was Sarah. She looked older, thinner, her hair longer and braided tight, but it was her. The same dark eyes, the same way she held her shoulders, the same scar above her left eyebrow from when she'd fallen off the porch steps as a girl. Ethan's hands went numb, his throat closed. He tried to speak, but no sound came. And then a man stepped out of the cabin. He was younger than Ethan, broad-shouldered and clean-shaven, with an easy smile and a hand resting casually on Sarah's lower back. He said something Ethan couldn't hear, and Sarah laughed, a sound Ethan hadn't heard in years. The man kissed her forehead. Ethan turned his horse and rode. Ethan turned his horse and rode. Ethan hash. He made it half a mile before he had to stop. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't hold the reins. He dismounted, stumbled into the brush, and vomited until there was nothing left. She was alive. Alive and cooking for another man, laughing with him, letting him touch her like Ethan had never existed. The rage came first, hot and vicious, roaring through him like wildfire. He wanted to ride back, drag her out of that cabin, demand answers, demand the truth, demand why she'd let him think she was dead while she built a life with someone else. But beneath the rage was something worse, doubt. What if she'd left on purpose? What if she'd been unhappy and never told him? What if she'd seen him ride away that morning 2 years ago and decided it was her chance to disappear? Ethan pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to breathe, trying to think. He could leave, ride north like he'd planned, and never look back. Let her have whatever life she'd chosen. But the thought made him feel like he was drowning. Or he could go back, confront her, risk the answers he wasn't sure he wanted. He waited until dark. The cabin glowed warm with lamplight when he approached on foot, leaving his horse tied a quarter-mile back. He could hear voices inside, low and easy, the kind of talk that comes from familiarity. The man laughed. Sarah said something too soft to make out. Ethan's stomach twisted. He moved to the window and peered inside. Sarah was washing dishes. The man sat at the table, whittling something from a piece of wood. The scene was painfully domestic, so normal it felt like a knife in Ethan's ribs. Then Sarah turned, and Ethan saw her face in the lamplight. There was a bruise on her cheekbone, faint yellowing but unmistakable. His blood went cold. He stepped back from the window, pulse hammering. The bruise changed everything, or maybe it changed nothing. He didn't know, but he couldn't leave now. He knocked. The voices inside stopped. Footsteps approached. The door opened, and the man stood there, silhouetted against the light, his smile fading when he saw Ethan's face. "Help you?" the man asked. Ethan's voice came out rough. I need to talk to your wife. The man's expression hardened. You got the wrong place. I don't. Listen, friend. I don't know what you think. Sarah, Ethan said loudly. Sarah Cross. The man went still. Behind him Ethan heard a sharp intake of breath. Sarah appeared in the doorway. Her face had gone white. Her eyes locked on Ethan's, wide and disbelieving, like she was seeing a ghost. Ethan, she whispered. The man looked between them, jaw tightening. You know him? Sarah didn't answer. She just stared at Ethan, her hand rising slowly to her mouth. I thought you were dead, Ethan said. His voice cracked. I looked everywhere. Sarah's voice broke. I thought you were too. Posh, hash hash. The man stepped between them, his body tense. Someone want to tell me what the hell is going on? She's my wife, Ethan said. The man's face twisted. That's a damn lie. It's not. Ethan's eyes never left Sarah. We were married 4 years ago, in a church outside Bent Creek. You wore your mother's ring. Sarah's hand dropped to her side. She was trembling. Sarah, the man said, his voice sharp now. Tell him he's wrong. But Sarah didn't speak. She just looked at Ethan with something caught between terror and grief. And the silence stretched so long it felt like the world was ending. The man's hand dropped to his belt. Ethan saw the revolver tucked there and tensed. You need to leave, the man said quietly. Right now, not without answers. You don't get answers. You get gone, or you get buried. Your choice. Ethan's fists clenched. He'd never been a fighter, never wanted to be, but rage and desperation made men do things they couldn't take back. Please, Sarah said suddenly, her voice barely audible. Both of you, just stop. She stepped forward, putting herself between them, her hands raised like she was calming wild horses. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. Ethan, she said softly, you shouldn't be here. Why? The word came out like a plea. Why did you leave? Where have you been? Sarah's mouth opened, but no sound came. She looked at the man behind her. Some silent exchange. Ethan couldn't read, and then back at Ethan. I can't explain, she whispered. Not now, not here. Then where? The man's hand tightened on his gun. She doesn't owe you anything. She owes me the truth. And what if the truth is she doesn't want you anymore? The words hit like a punch. Ethan staggered back a step, breath catching. Sarah flinched. That's not, she started, but the man cut her off. We're done here, he said, stepping forward, his hand now resting openly on the revolver. You got 5 seconds to walk away. Ethan looked at Sarah, really looked at her, at the bruise, at the way she held herself, shoulders tight, like she was bracing for a blow, at the fear in her eyes, that wasn't directed at him. Come with me, Ethan said. Right now, just walk out that door. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I can't. Yes you can. You don't understand. Then make me understand. The man drew his gun. Last warning. Ethan didn't move. He kept his eyes on Sarah, willing her to see him, to remember what they'd been, what they'd promised each other under that cottonwood tree the night before they married. Sarah, he said, please. She took a step toward him. The man grabbed her arm. Don't. Something in Ethan snapped. He lunged forward, shoving the man back. The revolver went off, a deafening crack, and the bullet tore through the doorframe, sending splinters flying. Sarah screamed. Ethan tackled the man, and they hit the ground hard. Fists flew. The gun skittered across the dirt. Sarah was shouting something, but Ethan couldn't hear it over the roaring in his ears. Then Sarah was there, pulling at Ethan's shoulder, her voice breaking. Stop, please, Ethan, stop. He froze, chest heaving, the man beneath him bloodied and gasping. Sarah was crying. Hash. Ethan stumbled back, his knuckles split and throbbing. The man rolled onto his side, groaning. Sarah knelt beside him, but her eyes stayed on Ethan, wide and desperate and full of something he couldn't name. Go inside, she told the man quietly. Sarah, go. The man glared at Ethan, then limped into the cabin, slamming the door behind him. Sarah stood slowly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. You shouldn't have come here, Sarah said finally. I didn't know you were here. I saw smoke. I thought. Ethan's voice cracked. I thought I was going crazy. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, looking small and tired. You were supposed to think I was dead. Why? She hesitated, then walked toward the fence, away from the cabin. Ethan followed. When she stopped, she stared out at the dark hills, her voice barely above a whisper. "There were men," she said, "after you left that day. 3 of them. They said you owed money to someone in Silver Fork. Said if you didn't pay, they'd take it out of you, or me." Ethan's blood ran cold. "I never owed anyone." "I know. They lied, but they had guns, Ethan, and they were going to wait for you, so I ran." Her voice broke. "I thought if I disappeared, they'd think you had nothing left to lose, that they'd leave you alone. I looked for you, for months. I know I heard." She turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "But I couldn't come back, because if I did, they'd know you still cared, and they'd use me to hurt you." Ethan felt like he'd been gutted. "So you just stayed gone." "I didn't have a choice." "And him?" Ethan gestured toward the cabin. "What's his story?" Sarah looked away. "His name is James. He found me half-starved on the road, gave me work, a place to stay. He's been kind." "He hit you?" "No." Sarah's voice sharpened. "That was an accident. A horse spooked, and She stopped, seeing the disbelief in Ethan's face. "He's not like that." "Then why are you afraid?" Sarah's face crumpled. "Because I don't know what happens now. I don't know if those men are still looking. I don't know if coming back to you would get us both killed. And I don't know if you can even forgive me for letting you think I was gone." Ethan stepped closer, his voice rough. "There's nothing to forgive." "Yes, there is." She looked up at him, her eyes red and raw. "I let you grieve. I let you lose everything. I could have sent word. Could have. You were protecting me. I was protecting myself." Ethan reached out slowly, carefully, and took her hand. She flinched, then stilled. Her fingers were cold and calloused, but they were hers. "I never stopped looking," he said, "even when everyone told me to give up, even when I had nothing left, because I knew you wouldn't just leave." Sarah's tears fell harder now, and she collapsed against him, sobbing into his chest. Ethan wrapped his arms around her, holding her like she might vanish again if he let go. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." "I know." They stood there in the dark, 2 people who'd been broken by the same lie, piecing themselves back together one breath at a time. James came out of the cabin, an hour later. His face was bruised, his lips split, but his expression was guarded rather than angry. He looked at Sarah, then at Ethan, and something passed between them, an understanding, or maybe just resignation. "She told you?" James asked. Ethan nodded. James sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I didn't know she was married. Not at first. By the time she told me, I'd already..." He stopped, jaw tightening. "I'm not the villain here." "I know," Ethan said quietly. James looked at Sarah. "You staying or going?" Sarah's hand tightened around Ethan's. "I don't know if it's safe." "Those men are gone," James said. "The one who sent them got arrested 6 months ago. I heard it in town. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to leave." Sarah stared at him. "What?" "I'm not proud of it," James said, his voice rough. "But you were happy here, or at least you seemed like you were, and I thought maybe that was enough." Sarah's face went pale. "You lied to me. I kept you safe. You kept me trapped." James flinched, but he didn't argue. He just looked at Ethan. "Take care of her, better than I did." Ethan nodded. James turned and walked back into the cabin, without another word. Sarah and Ethan left before dawn. They rode double on Ethan's horse, heading east toward land Ethan didn't own anymore, but knew like the back of his hand. They didn't talk much. There wasn't much to say that hadn't already been said. By the time the sun rose, they'd reached the river where they used to fish in the summers. Sarah dismounted and knelt by the water, splashing her face, and when she looked up at Ethan, her expression was raw and uncertain. "What do we do now?" she asked. Ethan crouched beside her. "We start over. We don't have anything. We have each other." Sarah smiled. "A small fragile thing, but real. Is that enough?" Ethan thought about the 2 years he'd spent as a ghost, wandering the edges of a life he couldn't let go of. Thought about the moment he'd seen her by that cabin, and felt the world crack open. Thought about the way her hand felt in his, like coming home after a long and terrible journey. "It's everything," he said. They rebuilt slowly. Ethan found work on a ranch 20 miles south, and Sarah took in mending and baking. They rented a small house with a leaky roof, and a garden plot that grew more weeds than vegetables. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Sometimes, late at night, Sarah would wake from nightmares, dreams of men with guns, or James's face, or the moment she'd run and never looked back. Ethan would hold her until the shaking stopped, whispering promises he intended to keep. And sometimes, Ethan would ride to the ridge where he'd first seen the smoke, and he'd sit there in the fading light, thinking about the choices that had brought them here, about how close he'd come to losing her twice, about the smoke that had led him back to the one person he'd never stopped loving. Years later, when they had a son with Sarah's dark eyes and Ethan's stubborn jaw, she would tell the boy about the day his father found her. She'd leave out the hard parts, the fear, the lies, the violence, and focus instead on the moment Ethan had taken her hand and refused to let go. "He came for me," she'd say, her voice soft with wonder. "Even when he didn't know I was waiting, he came." And Ethan, standing in the doorway with flour on his hands and a smile creasing his weathered face, would think about smoke rising in the distance and the impossible grace of second chances. Some things you lose, some things you fight for, and some things, if you're lucky, find their way back to you through the smoke.